Efka, if I said to you, I need more ammo, what would a game spring to your brain?
What would a game spring to my brain?
Yeah, which game would spring to your brain? I can't even grammar. I'm so excited for this podcast.
I think that the game that would spring to my brain would be something Scottish.
That was nowhere near Scottish.
I know, but that's how video games do Scottish, isn't it? So I would say Still Wakes the Deep.
Incorrect.
Is it haggis?
No. No. What? I don't even know where you went with that, but yeah, okay. No. It is Deep Rock Galactic.
That's not Scottish. That's Swedish.
That is Swedish.
Yes.
Welcome to Talk Cardboard, a podcast about board games and everything adjacent, with me, Elaine, and you.
Me, Efka.
On today's episode, we will be talking about Deep Rock Galactic, the board game. But first...
an entirely new segment. Work in progress. What kind of work do we do, Elaine?
Board game work.
We play board games. So let's talk about the board games that we played over the last week.
I heard you played Nokosu Dice.
Very quickly, because people can't buy this. They can't have this game anyway. It's notoriously unavailable. So a year and a half ago, I stood in line for 2 hours just to get myself a copy of Nokosu Dice in the one place at the one time where you could actually buy it. And I was there in Germany, Essenspiel. Woke up very early to stand in that line, got myself a copy. You played it. I had not played it for a year and a half. Finally got a chance to play it. I don't know how that happened, but it just did. At some point, you just like give up, right? And put it on your shelf and leave it. I finally played it. Is it good? Yes, it's pretty good. It's a trick-taking game that uses both cards and dice. I will say it is notoriously unintuitive because it has this weird wrinkle where Trump is itself a suit, basically, technically. Not quite, but sort of, right? and explaining the vagaries of that through play. Like, I played a free player game. Both of the other players who had not read the rule book, I kept having to reiterate, like, no, you can't play this, or yes, you can play this, or if you play this, this is actually how it's going to play out. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, no, I understand. I get it. I understand. And then that knowledge would immediately like melt away from their brains. And like no fault of their own. I understand why the game is like that, right? So it was very clever. Both players really enjoyed it, I think, including me, because you can sort of really manipulate this game. You get a lot of tweezers to pull things out, right? So it's fun. It's interesting.
That's a nice image.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more of it. But so far, tentative, kind of like real cool, but also real weird.
We also played Eternal Decks.
So you taught me this one.
Yeah.
And can I just say one thing? Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah.
What a gorgeous looking game.
The presentation of it is super. It even comes, if you've played Lacuna, it comes with one of those sorts of mats. Rather than a board, it comes with a cloth.
Yeah,
nice
it's a cloth board. Yeah.
But it's huge.
Uh-huh.
It took up like most of our table.
But it adds to the visual aesthetic of the game so much. You place a lot of different cards and tokens on top of it. Card decks, right? Because it's called Eternal Decks. So very quickly, just to give people an impression of what Eternal Decks is. So this is from the designer of Trick Taker, which is a trick-taking game. This is not a trick-taking game. This is actually a cooperative card game that is more akin to things like The Crew. But again, no trick-taking, right? The principle of it is that, with limited communication, you're trying to keep on playing without busting to get towards an end state, which is collecting these sort of stones that have various different conditions to be collected. But you have like a hand of cards, but you can only play each card once, right? Once you play that card, that's removed from the game, right? Yeah. And you have to keep playing cards. As soon as you cannot play a card, the game is over for everyone, right? And so you're trying to engineer states where you can pick up more different cards with different values and suits and stuff like that, so that you can keep like progressing, and there's special abilities that you can pick up. For example, I mentioned that cards go away forever. Well, what if you get a special ability that lets you return any one card that you've played and is gone forever, but not this one? This one's coming back. Or you could get like a card that functions as a complete wild, so you can play it like anywhere, and it's like, ha, this is my one answer to everything. Or you can replace cards places, stuff like that, right? So it's good fun. I enjoyed it. We only played it as a 2-player game. I didn't get much of your impression on it. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I thought it was really clever. The rulebook is a little clunky, and I thought I might struggle to teach to have internalized it enough to be able to teach it to you, but it was fine. I think.
I think so. Yeah.
I like the way that there are 3 different rows of cards that you're playing into, and they each have a different condition. So there is like 2 main conditions, but then these rows add additional conditions to those, so they make it a little bit harder. And you're trying to fill up these rows to reach the end so that you can get more cards, because that is what you need to do, because like you said, you never get the cards back that you've played. And I thought that was really interesting and very clever, because you're constant and you know what cards you're going to get from this deck. It's not a surprise. It's not like random. You know exactly what numbers and what colors you're going to be getting from these decks that you acquire. So you're looking at like, well, what do I need to get next to be able to keep this rhythm going? And I thought that was smart.
Rhythm is actually a really good word for it, because the whole game sort of undulates, right? And there's a strange sort of, like, it goes slow, it goes fast. It's not like The Crew, where it's constantly like, we're gonna lose at any moment, and any given play could be bad. Whereas here it's sort of, it eases off and then ramps up. I will say our first play was quite easy, and maybe it's because it's the starting scenario, and we played a 2-player game. I think that game becomes harder with more players, because you have a lot less control over what people can play and what they can do. So I'm looking forward to exploring those. But so far, first impressions incredibly strong. This could be a hit.
I guess we also need to talk about Elden Ring, the board game, because we played that too.
We played 4 scenarios of Elden Ring,
4 scenarios.
The board game. Let me tell you, do you know what's not going to be a hit? It'll probably sell well, which is kind of the sad part. But my oh my, I think it probably won't surprise some people to hear that Elden Ring, the board game, is a big old stinker.
It was very boring.
It was dreadfully dull. I do want to share one impression from it. So the general consensus, and I sort of agree with this, is that Elden Ring, the board game, is mostly poorly executed, but it has a good combat system. And I don't think that is untrue, but I think that consensus oversells how good the combat system is and undersells how poorly executed the rest of it is. And just to illustrate, my main takeaway from these 4 scenarios, which were 3 starting scenarios and the first boss fight, right, was that there is effectively a narrativization similar to what you had, like when you had in the 80s and the 70s, when they took sci-fi films and they wrote novelizations of it, right? So there is that, but of the tutorial of Elden Ring, the video game. And because nothing happens in the tutorial, it was literally like someone powered up Elden Ring, started playing it, and we're like, okay, so what do I see? I guess I see some moss.
A rock with some moss on it.
Yeah, I see some skeletons. I see some sarcophagi. So I'll write about that, but in the most prosaic, flowery language that went all on and on and on and on.
Confusing as to what it was trying to get across. The actual story that it was trying to get across. Plus, when you tried to, it was like, would you like to interact with this sarcophagus? You can have a look at it, and you're like, yeah, okay then. And immediate punishment.
Yeah, and kind of weird, because I get where that's stemming from, because the whole From Software oeuvre is known to be punishing, right? But it is also known for rewarding exploration, because whether you are punished or not, something interesting happens, right? And nothing interesting happened here. It was just like, oh, here's you being punished for trying things in a kind of telly-offy way. It felt very,
It
very...
felt like the game was laughing at us for even trying.
But like in a way that is not true to From Software games. I find that antithetical. And also, here's me going a little bit literary. I said prosaic, right? If there's one thing, like in literary terms, if I were to describe From Software games, I would say that they are poetic, right? They're not prosaic. They are about moods and vibes and feelings and illusions and you know, kind of rhythm, right? So there's a lot of poetry, I think, in those video games, and there is nothing poetic about Elden Ring, the board game. It was frighteningly dull, and the combat system, I will give it that it is functional.
It was fine,
and okay, but it's nothing to write home about. So we'll have more words on it later, probably in video, because it's the sort of thing that I think people are going to want to hear about. But yeah, not good.
Before they drop a whole lot of money on it.
Yeah. Oh my, £200 for one of the free core boxes, 120, I think, for the other two each.
Can we talk about a game that I did enjoy playing?
Which is another adaptation.
You knew what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We played Flow, which is it's not based on the film, but it's from the same IP as the film.
So I played Flow 3 times this week. You played it once.
Yes.
Right? And it's really nice. So if you've not watched the film, I have to drop this disclosure here. It is a Baltic film, as in it comes from a Baltic state. Not my Baltic state. There's technically two of them only. If you're going by language, but culturally there is three of them. So there's Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. I'm Lithuanian. Flo is Latvian. If you've not watched Flow, that's the animated feature film that won an Oscar this year. I think very deservedly so. I never thought I would say that a Baltic film won an Oscar.
It's very exciting for you, right?
It's so exciting. And then I watched it, and it's so good. If you've not watched Flow, do yourself a real service. Put it on. It's sad, but sad in that sort of wholesome way that is affirming, and
it is poetic.
Oh yeah, and beautiful, and so heart gripping, I guess is the right term. I don't know if I would go so far to extend all of these adjectives to Flow the board game.
No,
but it is also a Baltic produced board game by a Latvian publishing company, and the most exciting part to me, Lithuanian designers.
And not only Lithuanian designers, but it had a Lithuanian rule book, which was incredibly exciting.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah, that was impressive, the amount of languages they squeezed into the two rule books that were in the box. If you've played Race for the Raft, you'll have an idea of what this game is about. You're basically trying to get 4 animals that are at the corner of a board onto a ship that is in the middle of the board by drawing paths in water.
It is a real-time game where you draw tiles and you place these tiles hoping not to bust, basically. And the busting condition is that you are, I think it's like running out of tiles, isn't it? Yeah, like if all the tiles are gone and you didn't manage to create a pathway towards the boat in the middle for all the 4 animals, that's it, you bust, right? And you have these 1-minute rounds where everyone, one at a time, draws a tile, places it, and some of these tiles are bad because they're like rocks, so you can't pass through. It's nice, it's cute, it's very light. I think you're right with Race to the Raft. It is a similar game. However, Race to the Raft is way thinkier.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just the same kind of idea of getting something from somewhere to somewhere else. Yeah,
it's much gamier. This is very much, because, it is based on a cartoon, so it is aimed at families and kids, right? I don't think we're the right target audience for this game. But I think we were both able to appreciate it nonetheless. The starting scenario touched too much on the very easy side. There was very little tension. but it was cute, and like we understood the idea of the game. We thought, okay, this is good, but this is good if you're teaching it to like an 8-year-old or something like that, right? Which I think is important, right? Because I think, if a kid has watched Flow and did not end up with post-traumatic stress disorder and wants to return to that world, then, they'll want to play this cute little game as well. So I think it fulfills that remit. But there are scenarios, and I know you've not played them, but I have. And the second time I played it, we played it without scenarios again, and everyone was just like, this is nothing. This feels like nothing. But then the second time, we put in a bunch of scenarios, so now the boat does not have 4 exits going from it, so you can like make pathways through like to all the corners of the tile, not the corners, the edges of the tile, right? Now there's only one, right? So you have to like extend a much
only one
path.
entrance to the boat.
Yeah, there's only one entrance to the boat. The second one, like there's these special cards that you can play that give you special abilities, and normally you can just discard a tile and get a new card. Now you have one card for the entire scenario. Play it wisely. And the third one was you need to you just have to, like, these spaces that are blocked permanently on the board, right? There's nothing that can go there, right? So there were like these 3 conditions, and you draw random conditions, and you draw a number of them based on how difficult you want to make it. So we went for medium difficulty, and it felt tense. There was a nice amount of tension to it, and everyone that kind of at first was like, whatever, we're like, oh, okay, this is nice, right? Again, I don't think it's anything special, but it's nice.
And I don't think it pretends to be anything that it isn't. I don't think it's, with something like Elden Ring, it pretends to, or it gives you the impression that it's going to reproduce the same feelings and tension and excitement that you get from playing the video game, right? And I don't think this pretends to be anything like that. It just says, here is a game that features the animals that you've just watched in this film, and here's a little like puzzle game to do now.
Finally, I played another game of Dune, Imperium, dash. Is it dash Uprising and then Bloodlines? I'm sorry, I'm lost in the nomenclature. But another game of Dune, Imperium, Uprising, Bloodlines. So Bloodlines is oh, God, this segment is too short to explain the intricacies of the Dune Imperium expansion oeuvre. But basically, Dune Imperium is a board game. Dune Imperium Uprising is a second sort of edition, a different iteration of that board game. And Bloodlines is an expansion that is for that second edition, but it can also work as an expansion for Dune Imperium. It's one of my favorite games, and Bloodlines is a very cool expansion in that it does exactly what Dune Imperium continues to do through that entire oeuvre, which is it shaves more and more wood off of itself to remold it into something ever so slightly more perfectionist than it was before. It's like it always tweaks these edges and kind of introduces new little vagaries and new little puzzles into the system, and offers like a new perspective into what the strategy of this game is, what the meta game of this game is, and it kind of tries to fix these little rote conventions that develop as a new edition comes out. So, for example, when Dune Imperium Rise of Ix came out, which was the first expansion for Dune Imperium, it introduced this whole idea of like the Spacing Guild being much more important because there's like extra Spacing Guild spaces, but there became this sort of almost like Twilight Imperium-esque third edition where people constantly cycled through this motion of picking the same action tiles or whatever they were called. So someone would always pick the one that gave them the victory point, and the next person would always pick the tile that gave them initiative, because the next turn they could be the first person to pick the tile with the victory point, right? And then the next person would pick the thing that let them pick initiative next. It's still on and on and on, right? And so there's these cycles that develop, right? And so as these cycles develop, I think the designers of Dune Imperium are trying to kind of shave those cycles off and introduce kind of new perspectives into play. So Dune Imperium Uprising Bloodlines introduces the idea of these Sardaukar warriors, which are these bigger cubes that you can recruit and put them into combat. But they are one-time use only, and if you want to redeploy them, they cost you 2 Solari. So
does it still have sandworms?
It still has sandworms, right? So sandworms are still a part of it, but like there's a different type of warrior now that introduces like new abilities, and the abilities are basically every time you recruit a Sardaukar warrior, and you can have multiple of them, you recruit them when you go to certain spaces. You also pick a special ability that's, for example, have an extra cube every time you reveal. But you only get that cube if you actually deploy the Sardaukar warrior. And you can get multiple abilities. Like you can get extra purchasing power, on your reveal turn. But again, only if you deploy that Sardaukar warrior, right?
So there's a synergy.
Yeah, kind of. You can invest heavily into this if you want to. So every time you deploy like one Sardaukar warrior, you get 4 different abilities triggering, right? But then you need to pay money to redeploy the Sardaukar warrior every time. Or you can have like multiples of them, but only deploy one and then another one on another turn, and so on and on and on. But of course, like in anything Dune Imperium, if you want to do that, you're foregoing a whole bunch of different other things that are equally, if not more important, right? So there's extra conundrums, right? Additionally, you get technologies in the same way that you did in Rise of X, but slightly differently. There's things that it adds, a whole bunch of new cards, a whole bunch of new leaders, just more toys to play around with. Good expansion. I liked it a lot. I had a really good time playing it. I played Dune Imperium, the original, much more than Dune Imperium Uprising, so I'm still coming to terms with the strategies and the vagaries of Uprising, and especially now that the puzzle is changed by Bloodlines, the cards feel very, very finicky, much more finicky than they've ever been. And that's a good and a bad thing. Obviously, it's not great for starting players, but pretty interesting, compelling, meaty to anyone who's enjoying the system. That's it. That's Dune Imperium Uprising Bloodlines. It was a game-rich week for me. I played a lot of games. You played slightly less, and I feel very bad about that because
Why?
I don't know. I wanted you to partake in more gaming, but there were no opportunities. So that's sad because I got to play a lot of cool games this week. Apart from you got to play some cool games, and mostly Elden Ring, the board game. So that's why I feel sad.
But there's always another week.
And there's always another segment. And this new segment is an old segment. It's audience correspondence. But because we've been gone for like 6 months, we don't have any questions. So this week, this inaugural week, please, your questions, please send them to
Elaine@nopuncluded.com.
And we will have some of them, or one of them, or maybe more of them answered in the next week's episode.
It is time, Efka, to talk about the meat in this episode sandwich, which is Deep Rock Galactic, the board game.
There is something you said to me that I can't get out of my head whenever we started discussing this. And you said, for the first time, I can say,
I have played the video game of this board game.
You know the source material intimately.
I do, yeah. Yeah, we've played Deep Rock Galactic, the video game. I think it's 50 hours, around 50 hours.
Which is good enough to know the thing, right?
Yeah.
We've done some deep dives, which is the end game content, right?
I mean, we've not succeeded at the deep dives.
No,
but
it's hard. They're hard. They are hard. They're much harder than the regular game. Do you want to tell us what Deep Rock Galactic is about?
The video game or the board game?
I mean, either, really.
Yeah, because they do run in parallel to each other. So you're playing in both. You are playing dwarves who are employed by a mining company to go on various missions to retrieve different things. So it might be types of flower or mushroom. It might be to mine certain elements, minerals. It might be to protect some of the company's equipment.
But in space.
Yeah, you in the video game, you are very clearly on some kind of space station that has the drill on it that's going to take you down.
To Hoxie's 4.
To Hoxie's 4. In the board game, the idea is the same. You're each playing a dwarf who is doing the same thing, collecting minerals or whatever for the company. The wrinkle of that is that why it's not so easy is because there are swarms of beasts that will come and attack you every so often.
When you say beasts, you mean aliens called glyphids.
Yeah, or various different things.
It's pretty much just the glyphids. It's just that there's different types of glyphids, I think. Yeah.
Are they all glyphids?
I think they're all glyphids, yeah. Because there's things like the Mactera, which are like, I think, just flying glyphids.
I see.
Right?
So it's like saying earthlings.
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know like the deep lore of Deep Rock Galactic, but I know they're glyphids and they're space bugs. They are space bugs.
Space bugs, yeah.
Basically, yeah. So like it is. I think what's important is like for the aesthetic of Deep Rock Galactic is the silly mood that you are basically the lowest of the low in this deeply sinister mining corporation. And your lives are dispensable. You are often just like quipping about things about how you're not paid well and how
or you have a pebble in your boot.
Yeah, or how the company's in charge of everything and you're nothing,
It's very silly.
Yeah.
The kind of costumes that you get whilst you're playing, are quite silly too.
There's a lot of like cosmetics. So what's nice about Deep Rock Galactic? So first of all, it is a cooperative video game, which doesn't happen very often, right? Like when a game is primarily aimed as a cooperative experience, but because it's multiplayer, they could have gone for like the free to play route where you pay for the cosmetics, and there is like the slightest element of that you can purchase DLC.
Yeah, sure.
Which will give you some cosmetics, and there is like the model of a season pass, but you don't have to pay for the season pass or anything like that. You just it's part of the cost that you paid to play the video game, which I think is very nice. Again, you can buy the DLC if you want like extra cosmetics, but like any kind of unlockables, you just get them for playing the game, which is very nice for a multiplayer game, I think. So very rarely do you encounter that. Very rarely do you encounter cooperative games, that are not like PvP or whatever, that are multiplayer. So it's just nice and fun.
Yeah, and I played the same character in the board game as I have been playing the entire time in the video game. I think you played the same character as well.
Yeah.
But you've kind of changed it up a little bit in the video game.
Yeah.
So I've been playing the driller for the entire time because the driller is, the bomb, honestly.
All right, okay.
Has
I believe you.
Enormous drill hands that just goes brrr, like this through anything really, which is a lot of fun. Just makes big holes. Risk of falling down is high, but falling through a big hole that you've accidentally made. And you enjoy, I think, playing the scout most, right?
Yeah, because it lets me zip around very fast.
But you have also played the engineer.
Yeah, I've played the other free roles.
And the gunner.
Yeah, and the gunner, yeah. So they each kind of have a role. So the scout is very fast, it has a zip line, goes around the board, like...
Yeah, you are super fast. Like,
yeah.
When we were playing the video game yesterday, there was something that we needed to get 10 of. And you were like, okay, let's start doing that. And there's me like drilling away trying to get the first one. And then suddenly I see you've collected 5 of them already because you are so fast at whizzing around. For me to get up anywhere high as the driller, I need to drill a hole so that drill a ladder basically so I can get up. You're just like pew 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 all over the map. So that's fun in the video game. Did you feel that same feeling in the board game?
No.
As the scout?
No.
Explain.
Okay, so technically the scout is a little bit faster. So the way the video game structured is it's structured like a shooter, right? Like a first person shooter. You go around, except and you do shoot things. You see the bugs attack you, you go shoot. The way that's ported into the board game is that it's structured like a dungeon crawler, right? You have a scenario, you have a map, you have figures, you move them around. So on your turn, you have free actions, and they can be move, shoot, and like pick up things, interact, and stuff like that. Very, very tropey standard dungeon crawler stuff. And of course, like a character in a dungeon crawler, you have special abilities that relate to you. So as the scout, my special ability was that I could basically walk and shoot at the same time with one action, which does technically make you faster. And it also lets you, because the scout has a zipline, can get around very far, very fast, and reach inaccessible areas. In the board game, the way that's modeled is that you can basically walk over holes, which are visually, I guess, holes, but like impassable terrain. You would have to drill around them. You would have to drill a pathway. I can just walk through them, right? It doesn't make me that much faster. I guess I do have like a kind of a sense of speed by being able to walk and shoot, right? But every time you shoot, you're expending resources. And I also want to add, like, the one thing that's important that carries over from the video game really well is this sort of sense of economy. There's a resource called nitra, which you mine to call a supply pod. And the supply pod is the thing that gives you guns, ammo, and health. Not guns, like you already have the guns. You just need like ammo. So the tenor of the video game is how fast can you do things per nitra, right? Because if you have enough nitra and you can find and mine the nitra fast enough, you will never run out of ammo, which means you can progress through the mission and you kind of just have to not die, which sometimes can be hard. But that's the predominant economy, like, because without ammo you will die, right? Yeah. So you are trying to do things fast enough so you don't run out of ammo, because enemies spawn constantly, right? And that's the thing that carries over in the board game as well, because you have free actions and then you draw, like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's effectively an event card. The event card could then spawn some glyphids. It might not, but it might, and it also advances this cube tracker, which
is like the clock.
Which is like the clock of the game, right? The cube tracker, if it passes onto a space that's like the spawn space, you draw a spawn card or swarm card, and then a swarm comes, so you have extra beasties. So you are trying to, again, mine the nitra and get to the other objectives across this map with your miniatures, before you get overwhelmed, and you make sure that you have enough ammo, because every time you shoot, you expend ammo. That's kind of the premise of the board game, I would say, right?
Yeah, and I think there's more than that carries across quite well, like the different types of terrain. So there is impassable terrain, which is, it's not even impassable terrain. It's only impassable for certain characters. Like, again, for you, if it's a chasm, you can hop over it. Yeah. If it's a wall, I can drill through it. Like, that wall is impassable to you, but it's not impassable to me because I can drill through it. The chasm is impassable to me because I can't just hop over it. But it's not impossible to you because you can with your zipline. So I think that's translated quite well.
Translated, but is the feeling of enjoyment translated? I'm going to throw your question back at you. You know, you as the driller have a similar ability that you can drill through walls more effectively. Yeah. But when you drill walls in the video game, I see a glint in your eyes. It's just like, yes, let me do this.
It's more like in the video game, because you are so fast and so efficient at going places and getting things, when I'm up, I feel like, okay, this is my time. I think it's more like that yes, okay, finally, this is what the driller was made to do, was born to do, drill through this big hole and get us to the next part of the map. So that's the fun for me as the driller in the video game. No, I did not necessarily feel like that in the video game, but I
in the board game.
Oh, sorry, yeah, in the board game. I nearly said it the wrong way around the first time. I didn't feel like that. I'm not sure that in the board game the different roles are differentiated as well as in the video game. Like, from the impression I got, we only played 2 scenarios. One was the starter scenario and one was a slightly more advanced scenario. And I never really felt like, okay, this is something that only I can do and you can't, or vice versa. One of the things I did find fun in the board game that is translated from the video game is that you can kill a tiny glyphid with your pickaxe. So you don't have to use any ammo. You can just whack it with your pickaxe and that's it, it's gone. Right? And that's nice because you don't want to be using your ammo on these tiny little things running around. One thing that I did think was very different was like you said, it is more of a dungeon crawler, right? And the board game almost felt like the opposite of the video game, in that in the video game it's very clear that you have this mission to do and the swarms are an annoyance that are gonna get in your way to do it. Like, this is what you need to do. You need to collect morkite. You need to collect alpaca blooms. You need to collect whatever, right?
Alpaca blooms.
Alpaca blooms.
Alpaca blooms. Which we call alpaca blooms because it's funnier.
Sorry. Yes. Whereas in the board game, it almost felt like, and especially if I had never played the video game, it almost felt like, oh, okay, so my goal is to kill all of these swarms, and then I need to get these resources as almost like a secondary thing.
Well, I mean, it kind of, I think, because the way I think what's weird and strange is that in this translation, what the board game actually loses is the broader picture of the game. Because technically your mission, both in the video game and the board game, is collect X number of this thing, right? In the way, there are swarms. The swarms are a lot more accentuated in the board game. They are like a much bigger threat in terms of what's going to stop you from completing this mission, right? Because the exploration of the map is not like a core feature in this game. It does exist because it's sometimes you like reveal extra areas, but these areas are always the same size of tile added in multiple configurations, and there's always going to be the same things on it, right? Like, you know that there's going to be an upgrade, you know that there's going to be some enemies, you know that there's going to be like a resource or an objective that you need to mine, right? Like, it's not, the exploration part isn't particularly interesting. What's great about the video game is that the exploration is kind of like at the core center of the game because you never know what you're going to find. You know the broad strokes of what you're going to find, but it's always like weird different configurations and layouts of map, and even though it is procedurally generated, it never feels procedurally generated. It feels like almost like you are exploring in a way, right? And so the core fun and tenor of the game is not reaching these objectives, but the shenanigans you get yourselves into, right? And these shenanigans spring from that combination of these very distinct different roles and what they can do and what trouble they can get themselves into. And because there's a lot of trouble, because if you suddenly zipline somewhere where it's like, oh wait, there's like a sheer drop beneath me, and like all I can do now is let go, right? And if I let go, I die. Oops, right? Like, how do I get out of that, right? So, and the way you get out of that is you have teammates, right, who have their own foibles, but also their own strengths, and you complement each other and you work together. That is the fun part of the game. Whereas in the board game, because you have this very rote, very tropey standard dungeon crawler kind of shell for delivering these systems, you're basically, well, we're miniatures on a map, right? And we have some distinguishing features, but mostly what we're going to do, right, is try and go to certain spaces to do certain actions unless we get overwhelmed by enemies. And so like they ported the core conceit of the game, but they didn't port the essence of the game at all.
But I'm not sure how they could.
That's the weird part of adaptations, isn't it? Like, in broad strokes, I didn't dislike anything about this. You know, And there's even some things that I like. I like them, and I really don't want to say that the good part of this is the miniatures, but they're kind of nice miniatures, you know? I think they look representative. And I like how big and chunky the dwarf miniatures are. They make them feel like the main characters, which they should, because they are. The Glyphids are definitely not the main characters. No. They're just the stuff that's in your way, right? And so, and the sculpts represent the characters really well, right? Maybe even slightly too heroic than they should be, because they're not heroes, they're bumbling idiots that often get too drunk on the job. That
was once. That happened one time.
Okay.
We didn't do that again. I liked how, talking of miniatures, I liked how in the board game you have a Molly. So in the video game you have this thing called Molly, which is this robot or donkey, they call it, that follows you around, and you empty out anything you've collected into her.
Yeah.
And then in the board
Molly
game,
is tiny in the video game.
Yeah,
right?
she's quite small in the video game. In the board game, she's quite big because she has a lid that you lift off to put the resources you've collected into. And I like that a lot.
It's a cute detail. Yeah. Like aesthetically, the game, I think, represents Deep Rock Galactic well. It's a bit too, like, the color black is for me a bit too dominant, because black is not a color that you see a lot in the video game. It's more like a kind of a fog of war when it's dark, right? But color is in abundance. Right? It's just that the color is muted and you often don't have a lot of brightness. The way they represent that in the board game is just, there's a lot of black, right? You know, and I wish it was more even brown, you know?
Yeah, it's odd because you have flares in the video game to light up the area around you. In the board game, you can just see everything, but not very well.
Yeah. So aesthetically, there's that one miss for me, but everything else is, I think, pretty spot on, right? But otherwise, yeah, like, I don't know. I felt like that was good. And they got like the broad strokes of the game through, you know?
I agree.
But the way I feel playing the video game is a constant amount of satisfaction and joy and fun and discovery. And the way I feel when I play the board game is like, well, this is another very rote dungeon crawler where I roll dice to attack enemies and you know, do some very standard things, you know?
I think there are certain things that are incredibly hard to get across from a video game to a board game. And I know I said to you about the atmosphere that you feel in a video game. So if you're playing something that is very atmospheric and where you empathize with the character that you're playing in, especially in a first-person shooter, you become almost that person that you are playing, right? And you feel for them and you want to see them succeed. It's not just you playing the game. You want this character to succeed. And I was hoping that because Deep Rock Galactic is not about that at all, it would translate better. But actually, I think that humor that is generated in the video game is also something that is super hard to get across into cardboard.
Because what they've done for like flavor text is just like took all the lines that we already know from the video game and put them in the board game, which is fine, right? Like you kind of expect that. But I think what made those lines so iconic, you know, like when you're messing about in your mining camp or whatever it's called, you know, in your base, right? You know, the mission control guy tells you off for something that you've done. And it's like, the first time you hear that line, it's really unexpected and funny. And, you know, like...
and the 20th time, you're like, yeah, did that again.
Yeah, right? It's still funny.
Been naughty again.
But when you see that in a board game, you're kind of almost hoping that they would deliver that same sense of getting this, like, absurd line that you didn't expect. But there isn't very much of that. It's just... like, oh, I know, yes, these are the lines from the video game. And yeah, I think it was missing that for me as well.
I wonder if you play, I mean, I was going to say, okay, I wonder if you play the video game a lot more straight than we play it. Like if you are very serious about, okay, we have to do these missions. And you're not mucking about. You're
like crank up the difficulty to max.
I guess
right?
so. Yeah. And like, because both of us have said, I'm just going to try this and see if this works. Whether it's like, you know, ziplining somewhere or drilling through something, and then we go, oh wait, no, I died. Sorry, and then the other one has to come and revive us. So, but I wonder if you play it a lot more seriously. Like, this is the mission. I must do this mission. In, out. You know, bam, 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 and get back.
Like very straight-laced, you mean?
Very straight-laced, yeah. I wonder if the board game represents that a bit better.
I don't know that it does, because here's the thing. I think, you know, we have become very intimately familiar with the roles that we play in the video game. And through the many, many hours that we played it, you know, we've learned a lot of tricks that we just didn't have, right? And that sort of system mastery comes from mucking about and doing things that you don't know whether they're going to work or not, you know? Like now, I used to see like Nitra way up in the ceiling, and it's just like, there's no ledge there. There's no way to get to it. And you're like, how am I ever going to mine that, right? And at first, it was a lot of dying to try and figure out how you get to it and how you reach it and how you stay afloat. And you know, things didn't work, but now I can do it. I see Nitra up above and go, okay, there's 2 or 3 ways that spring to my mind how I could approach this. And some of them are more valid than others. I'm going to go for that one. And I go and do it and execute it. And it feels good because I feel like I've learned my character. I don't think that the board game offers that depth of scope in terms of understanding learning your character and how it works, because it is mostly just like there is some system mastery, like, you know, how to be more efficient at, you know, taking out a glyphid so you can roll more dice. But it is mostly just, you know, I take an action to roll some dice and, you know, the dice come up or don't come up and, oh, okay, right? You know, it's not that there aren't tricks. It's just that there's nowhere near enough tricks and depth and kind of hidden depth, because Deep Rock Galactic is very breezy. It's easy to play, right? It's like the tricks that you learn, you learn like because it's wide enough for that scope to exist, right? Yeah. And the system presented here in the board game does not have that width.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think maybe that's why I found the board game less satisfying to play, because there aren't those opportunities to develop your character or develop your ability to play that character well.
There are some things, like, so for example, in the board game you have a primary weapon which is set like to your character, and there's 2 versions, and when you start a mission you can choose either version. But then you have a secondary weapon which is like a whole deck of cards, and anyone can pick anything. So there's some ways to like develop combinations in terms of like I can go for this, or I can go like for this one version of my primary weapon, and then I can combine it with this. And there are upgrades that are randomly distributed on the map that you pick up, and they let you like modify the main weapon. I think that's, for me, the most satisfying part of the board game. Like the ways that you can unlock like different systems. So for example, you could get an upgrade that lets you use any ammo for your primary weapon, and or for whichever weapon you slot into it, right? So you can use primary weapon ammo or secondary weapon ammo. So suddenly you have a gun that maybe, you know, didn't have that much ammo, but and that was like the downside of it, right? That like, this is good, but can you shoot it that often, right? And suddenly like you can shoot it really quite often because all the ammo works for it. And that's like an interesting upgrade. And you can get another upgrade that maybe adds like a stun ability or something like that, you know, and you have a wide area attack with it. Like there's things you can do to manipulate it. I don't want to kind of do the board game a disservice to say like, oh, there's no depth. There is some depth to it, but it is not the same kind of, it's like randomized depth. Because you don't know what upgrades you're going to get, you know, and you don't know if it's going to work with the weapons that you picked up or anything like that. There is a lot of kind of randomization towards that mastery. And I think it's that randomization that extends that mastery rather than like learning the ins and outs of your character and understanding the depth of tricks that you can do.
And I think that is something that the video game pushes you towards as well, because as I said, I've only played the driller because I really like the character, but even in the video game, things that you unlock are for the different characters. You don't just unlock things for the driller all the time. You're unlocking things for the engineer, for the scout. And if you don't use those, then they're kind of wasted. So the video game does push you towards trying different characters and doing different things. I didn't dislike the board game at all. I just didn't feel the satisfaction.
Yeah, agree. I think that's where our criticism comes from, because I don't want to give people the impression that this game is like complete bunk or whatever.
It's not.
No, it's fine. It's completely fine. It's a decent game.
It's a decent dungeon crawler.
Yeah, it's a decent dungeon crawler that does have some zing. It's just not Deep Rock Galactic in the way that I want Deep Rock Galactic to be, I guess. And to me, like, there is a whole slew of decent dungeon crawlers, and there's nothing about this one apart from it being Deep Rock Galactic that calls to me, right? But it doesn't satisfy that remit in the way I want it to.
That's the end of this episode. If you have anything to say about any of the games that we've mentioned, please email me, elaine@nopunincluded.com. Thank you so much for listening. And with that, why don't you say goodbye, Efka?
Goodbye, Efka.
Goodbye, Efka.